Solar.web is the most important digital tool that Fronius offers. It not only gives the possibility to analyze production and consumption data, it can also be an important tool for you installers for finding selling arguments to your customer. Hello and a very warm welcome to this webinar, Expert Tips for Solar.web. I will turn you into a Solar.web professional today. In preparation for this webinar, I went to my colleagues from the tech support. Those are the people that are sitting at the hotline, and probably you already had a call with them. And so those are the guys that are dealing with the most common issues in Solar.web. And they told me about the most frequently asked questions in their daily business regarding Solar.web, and this is exactly what we will go through today. That is in this case, myself, Maximilian Schett. It is a pleasure for me to talk you through this webinar today. And by my side, there's the most experienced colleague I have, Hans Pelzer. He will take care of your questions. So whenever there are questions, please do not hesitate. Feel free to ask them using the chat function, and Hans will take care of them while I am speaking. As always, after the webinar, I will also take some time to go through your questions, and we will discuss the most important ones. What is the plan for today? So we are looking at 4 cases. You see them in front of you. So first question, and this is probably the biggest and most important one, what to do when installing a Fronius inverter for the first time. So you know you are using the Fronius Solar Start app to register the inverter, and then you have to bring the device on Solar.web. And there some data needs to be entered, some permissions need to be given, and we will take a look how to do this best. Secondly, and this is what I mentioned in the introduction, we will take a look at the features that are relevant for the end customers, data analyzing, and also for how to use this data for consulting your customer. So not only to advise him how to optimize production and consumption, but also for finding arguments for selling a battery, for example, an ohm pilot and watt pilot, and so on. And last but not least, we will take a look at probably a minor question, how to proceed in Solar.web when exchanging components. This is also a question that arises at the tech support. Those are the 4 questions. We will start at the top, of course. So we will start with the first question, what to do when installing a Fronius inverter for the first time. I will no longer bore you with PowerPoint slides. We will just go directly into Solar.web. So we will start here. This is the Solar Start. You see you know the procedure, I guess. First you enter the network, then details about the product. I've already done this, and then only the last step remains to go into to bring the inverter into Solar.web. Then you click here, and you can either start the Solar.web setup if you do not have a Solar.web account, or you can invite an already existing PV system owner. Let's say you don't have an account yet, then you click here and you enter some data, what I was asked, state, city, and so on. And then I will not do this here. I will continue in Solar.web, and then you will end up here. So you will end up here, and your system, your PV system, your newly created PV system will appear here. This is a dummy account of us, so this inverter is not working. It is just placed in our energy lab, but for our purposes today, it's totally enough. So I will take this my PV system. And what you need to do in the beginning is to set up some settings. So you click here on settings, and then you end up here, and you see there are various categories of things you have to enter, and we will just go through this one by one. First of all, the profile of the PV system. You will already find the data you entered in the Solar Start app. I think there's nothing to add usually, so that's fine. You click on image. You can set a PV system picture. This is recommended. It first of all looks better for your customer if you do this, and secondly, it also, if you as an installer, you probably have various systems in your PV account, and then it just gives you some orientation if you have some pictures added to all the PV systems. Nothing more to do here. You go to contacts, and here in contacts you can add email addresses. So by clicking to add, I think it's clear, and you can set ticks on receiving reports and also receiving service messages. So you see this in the end here. For the reports are some personally tailored reports about EC power, DC power. Usually things you find those data then in an Excel file. This is usually things that are optional. I don't think you need it, so we recommend to set here at your email address no. However, what we also recommend is that you set here this tick for receiving service messages. For the service messages, you will see here in a minute, you get the messages when a blackout happens, when the inverter has lost connection or the battery has lost connection. So this is pretty useful information for you as an installer. You will see again in a minute. So you set here these contacts. Then you go to components. You find here all the components you already added in the Solar Start app, inverters, energy meters, the data sources that correspond to the inverters. And of course, you could also add new devices. You could add another inverter, or maybe what is more realistic for a new system, a watt pilot if it exists. As always, you are asked for the serial number and the verification code. You find both of those information on the right hand side of the inverter. So I can't show you here, but you find it on the right hand side. It's not so difficult to find. So add whatever components that are still missing. Then you go to permissions. This is probably the most important one. So you are, as an installer, when you are installing the system and you're bringing it to Solar.web, you are the owner of the PV system. After you set all those settings and it's configured and registered and all is done perfectly, then you are handing over the owner permission to the customer, and you stay as a supervisor in the PV system. So at the moment here, we are owner, and we could add here an email address, confirm email address, and then the rights we want to give to whomever. So there's supervisor right and there is the guest right. What is the difference? So what you see here, this is the owner right. The supervisor right is everything you see here except for change owner and delete. So those two options are only available to the owner. And guest rights is barely the energy balance. I show you in a other system. This here, for example, this is guest right. So here you just have overview, analysis, energy balance, nothing more. You can only see what the system is currently producing and what is consumed. So what we recommend, as I said, the end customer becomes the owner and you are becoming the supervisor. Some customers, they told us that this is source of some discussions with customers because customers do not want their installers to still have access to their system. And this is a totally understandable argument. However, we recommend to argue in the following to the customer. You as a supervisor, you have to fulfill some guarantee issues, for example, and for those guarantee issues, also for maintaining the system, also for dealing with error messages, you have to have access to the PV system. You could do also a compromise that you offer the customer that you stay as a supervisor as long as the warranty holds, and after that you leave the system. And what you can also mention is that your customer as an owner, he always has all the permissions inside, so he can see which email addresses have access to the Solar.web account. So it is not possible that someone else is adding, I don't know, the neighbor and the friends and whoever to watch the production data. If this was if this was the first time installing this system, I still would leave it. We go to change owner then over here, and then we will do this. Before this, you could add some tariffs. So those are the energy tariffs. There are two categories. One is feed-in tariff without Fronius smart meter. So this is mostly for plant-wise systems that are only feeding in and that are not producing for own consumption. So I don't think this will happen very often. In the residential area, we are mostly speaking of plants with smart meters. And there you can add reference tariffs and also feed-in tariffs. And I will show you. So you can add here a tariff. You can enter a date from which time to which time this is valid. We recommend to set this date or this period of time rather generously. So just put in, for example, for the next 10 years. Then you don't have to worry that this tariff expires and you have to add a new one. And anyway, if the tariff changes, you can change it anytime. We could add here, for example, let's say this tariff is 30 euro cents per kilowatt hour. We're adding this tariff. You can also add another tariff. Let's say this is a night tariff, and the night tariff is cheaper from 1 till 6 in the morning every day, 7 in the morning, and yeah, you enter it here. You can do this for the reference tariff as well as for the feed-in tariff. So here you see it's the same system. The tariff will then particularly be important for those consulting things I will show you in a minute, for costs and amortization analysis. Then you go to service messages. Those are the messages you are receiving when you remember here at contacts, when you set this tick at receiving service messages, then we are talking about the messages you can enter here. If you click on edit, you see the possible messages. Receiving a message if there is a blackout, if the battery has no connection, you see it here. If Fronius Solar.web has no connection to the battery, if the inverter has no connection to Solar.web. And there you can enter at which period of time you want to receive messages. At default, it's like this: 48 hours blackout times 1, 36 battery, and 48 for the inverter. We recommend that you leave it like this. However, feel free to change according to your feeling. So you enter this here, and then finally we see the last step. We see here change owner. This is what I told you before. You are setting the permission in that way that you stay supervisor and the end customer becomes the owner. You go here to change owner, enter here the email address of your customer. Let's say this is endcustomer@gmail.com. And then you can enter here keep permission for current user. So the permission you want to keep for yourself. And as I said, we would recommend that you stay supervisor. And then you click OK, and this is the last step. Please remember that if you are sending a permission invitation to someone, this person will receive an email, and in this email he has to accept this permission, and he has to do this within 7 days. So also for the customer, if he doesn't find the email address, let him check his spam ordner. You know the process. And then as soon as you have done this, then your PV plant, your PV system is fully installed and is ready for your customer. So this was question number one, or case number one, what to do when installing a Fronius inverter for the first time. And then let's say you have done this, you are already packing your tools and your stuff, and you are ready for leaving. And then you still have some minutes left, and in those minutes you decide to give your customer an you decide to show him the most relevant features of Solar.web. What are the most relevant features from the perspective of a customer? I will show you this as well. For this case, I will enter a different system. This PV system is one of a Fronius colleague of mine. I showed you before with guest rights. And the most important thing for customers is for sure the energy balance. And you see in the energy balance, you can either show production or consumption. Both is quite similar. I will show you now. Let's take this day here. You see here, production and consumption both is similar. There are only minor differences. Here, this blue line is the consumption rate in production, and in consumption, it's, let's say, the same, but the other way around. You see that the line here is the production rate. I will stay with production, and I would say probably the most obvious thing is the x-axis. This is the time. That's clear, I guess. And then what is sometimes the issue for some confusion are the y-axis. You see here on the left-hand side, it's kilowatt, and on the right-hand side, it's both Celsius, degree Celsius, and percent. The kilowatt, they are referring to all the areas, to the green area, the red area, watt pilot area. You see it also here. For example, power to battery at 8 o'clock was 2.93 kilowatt. And the right-hand side axis is referring to those two lines, to the green line and to the red line. The green line, this is the state of charge of the battery, and this is something what causes confusion. This is not shown in kilowatt, but is shown in percentage. So you see here at 1 in the morning, state of charge of the battery was 47%. And then power is used from the battery, it's almost 0 in the morning, and then it gets charged again, and at, what is it here, 9:45, it's already at 100% energy again. So always referring to the right-hand side. And the red line is similar. The red line shows that water temperature in the water boiler. And you see here the temperature was 58, 59 degrees. It's currently decreasing. And then when the on pilot is activated at 9 o'clock roundabout, then temperature is increasing to 71 degrees. Again, referring to this axis here. So this is probably something you want to show your customer, and of course, I guess this will be clear. Then you see here the different areas. You see the colors are responding to different users. Green is always the battery, red always the on pilot, and violet always the watt pilot for charging the car. This for the customer. Let's go to question number 3. What data is useful for consulting? And I will show you I will show you 4 indicators that you should keep in mind when you're analyzing a customer's PV system. First of all, we go here to year in total and production. And then if you are pointing your mouse over one of those months, you get this data here. And in this data, you find a very important indicator. This is the own consumption rate. The own consumption rate in June, in this case, in 2023, was 22%. What does this mean? So that means that 22% of all the energy that came from the PV system from this person was used in the household. 78% was fed into the general grid. We want this own consumption rate to be as high as possible. So usually I would say if this is 22%, then you could argue, or you could ask your customer if he considers buying an own pilot, for example, doing the warm water with the own pilot, maybe thinking about buying an electric vehicle or a battery, for example, just to use more of this energy instead of feeding it into the grid. Of course, this also depends on restrictions that differ from country to country. In Austria, it is the case that feeding in tariffs becoming less and less and less. And in the future, I think it's only a matter of time until they will reach zero. I know in other countries there are different regulations, and probably an own consumption rate and low consumption rate is not that big of a deal. In this case, this is a bit of a special PV system. This PV system is very large. It has a 30 kilowatt peak for a residential house. So this is a quite a large PV plant, and this is the reason why own consumption rate is here rather low, although my colleague already has installed a battery, a watt pilot, and own pilot, so he already has the full program. But usually consumption rate, we want to be as high as possible. For further analysis, you can go to consumption, and here at consumption you find another indicator, a very important one, and this is the degree of self-sufficiency. What is the degree of self-sufficiency? This tells you in how much of the overall needed energy came from the PV system. In this case, in June, 99% of all the energy that this person needed or this household needed was supplied by the PV system, and only 1% was taken from the public grid. We also want this number to be as high as possible, and this is, in this case, this is almost fantasy what this plant is offering. This is just because of the fact that it is a very large plant, as I said. Usually, if the self-sufficiency rate is low, if it is especially in summertime, 50%, for example, then you could argue towards the customer that he should consider extending the PV system, installing more modules, maybe getting a bigger inverter or a second inverter. This would be a good solution. Again, as I said, this plant is a little bit a special case because it's that big. You see here, he has an self-sufficiency rate from also in February of 90%, and also, or maybe let me check 2022, and all just in the months of December and January, self-sufficiency rate is below 50%. So you could say that this household is almost independent. So this is the second indicator. We go to indicator number 3, and you see it here. This is a premium feature. So this feature is only available when having Solar.web Premium. Just for you to remember, Solar.web Premium is an upgraded version of the standard version, obviously, of Solar.web. In Austria, it costs 24 euros a year. This amount can differ from country to country. So if you're considering buying the premium version, then please check the costs beforehand. What can you do here? Return on investment. This is where the tariffs come into play that we entered in the beginning in Solar.web, when you remember the first question we're dealing with. And then you see here in per month, or we can also take the yearly perspective. You see here per year the yield. So this is all the money that this person got by feeding into the public grid, the revenue, and you see the savings. So the savings, this is the amount of money that this guy didn't have to buy because he did produce the energy by himself and did not take it from the public grid. This again, remember, this is a rather large PV system. He had here total savings of over 5,000 euros in 2022, mostly because of the feeding yield, but also because of a substantial amount of savings. But this also might be an interesting number for your customer, just to show him how much revenue he is doing, and also to give him a feeling for the amortization period. And last but not least, you can also click on expenses, and there you see the costs. You see total energy costs would have been 1,866 euros. Because of the savings, because of the energy that this household did produce on the roof, the energy costs were only 200 euros in 2022. So those four sections you could check before going to your customer. And last but not least, we will also take a look at one special case, how to proceed in Solar.web when exchanging components. Let me show you. We go back to the dummy version, and if you go on components, then you see that you can either change those data sources, also the inverters, or deactivate them. When to use what? So if you are exchanging an inverter for another one, then you're clicking on exchanging. You enter the serial number and the verification code of the new one, and then the old one gets replaced by the new one. I think quite obvious. If you are not replacing this device, but only taking it from the system, then you are deactivating it. I can't do this here because this is the only data source. What is important and what is maybe causing some issues sometimes, an inverter or a device, no matter what, can only be in one Solar.web account. So imagine the following case. You are having an inverter, let's say an old snap inverter. You are exchanging this component at the PV system, at the customer, and then you want to sell this second-hand inverter to another customer, and you can basically do this, but you have to be careful that this old inverter is not anymore in the system of the old Solar.web account. It has to be deleted here, and then it can be activated in the other one. I think this is a special case. That is something that not occurs very often, but still, if please check. All right, we are getting to the end of this webinar. Let me go back to the opening slide and sum up what I just showed you. What to do when installing a Fronius inverter for the first time. You have to enter all the data that is needed. Just go on settings and go through one by one of those sections. Most importantly, please change the permissions at the end of this process so that the customer becomes the owner and you become the supervisor. What features are relevant for end customers? In the first place, it's the production and the consumption curve. You might want to show your customer the different colors which correspond to the different devices, and also remind him of those two y-axes and that the battery and the ohm pilot are corresponding to Celsius and to percent. Thirdly, if you're doing consulting, then you might want to consider Solar.web Premium, and you are you are taking a look at 4 indicators. Indicator number 1 is own consumption rate. Indicator number 2 is degree of self-sufficiency. And then you might also look at the return of investment and at the costs. And last but not least, when exchanging components, click either changing or deactivating. Please make sure that that the devices are only registered in one Solar.web account. It does not work that it is registered in 2. So far, so good. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. As always, the recording will be forwarded the next days. You will receive it. If you enjoyed this webinar, we are very happy to welcome you in another one. You find the registration at our homepage. You can register for webinars as well as for online trainings. And as well, I would be very happy to welcome you here at Fronius in a face-to-face training in Wales. Also, a good idea is to check our YouTube channel. In our YouTube channel, you find not only already recorded webinars, but also how-to videos. Those are very short and precise videos that should solve a problem in a very short amount of time. And then finally, let me check if there are any questions. I asked my colleague Hans. Hans, did you receive any questions you want to share?
Yes, Max, thank you. We have received a few questions, and I would like to answer the most important ones. Let's say there was one question about the simulation menu, how this works for battery simulation or on-pilot simulation. So basically, all you need is here just the information that you have the system running for more than 1 year with Fronius smart meter. So that's always important. Otherwise, it will not work. And after 1 year, you can do the simulation. So you just enter the battery size you would like to have, and then the system calculates the self-sufficiency. With the on-pilot simulation, you can calculate the more or less how the percentage of hot water generation per year, so how much will come from the PV system. So these are the 2 things you can do with the simulation. The other question was about the data transfer to Solar.web. So how long will the data be stored when the system is offline? Basically, this is depending on the data. So if you have battery and other data in the system, on-pilot and watt-pilot, as more devices you have, as more data is needed. And then we have roughly at around the 6 months to 12 months stored data on the pilot. So that means if you have more than 6 months or 12 months offline, then the system will lose the data, the oldest data. The data delays in energy balance is roughly 1 hour. So you can see the data within the next 1 hour in the energy balance. That's standard. It can be also a bit more, 2 hours. If a system is offline and you don't see the data, it can also be necessary that you do a software update. We have had several bugs issues in the past, which we have sorted out, especially software 1.28, which will come next week, will sort out a few issues of this. So please be patient and get the latest software update. One more question was about the reports. How can you delete created reports from the past? That's a point which is usually quite easy. Just delete the report, just put in a new report and delete the old report, and then it should also come to see only the new report anymore. So hopefully, I'm not 100% sure about this now, where is the issue here, but usually just delete the old one and put in a new one. Yes, Max, this was the questions. We stay online, we stay with the questions, we will continue to answer. Back to you then.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Hans. Thanks a lot for all the questions that we received. We're also always happy to receive questions. As Hans said, we will stay a couple of minutes longer in the chat. So if you are, I will turn off my camera and my microphone, but if questions are arising, then you still can ask them. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Thanks a lot for watching. I wish you a pleasant day and see you next time. Bye-bye.